Well, this is an informal meeting tonight, but since it's 6 o'clock and I promised people that we'd start at 6, we probably better get started. Um, I've obviously lost control already, which is fine. That's been my usual course of events for my entire life, so that's not a problem. Um, just so everybody understands, the rules of council that we have here allow for an informal meeting to talk about issues and organizational things. And I thought with some of the folks who are more seasoned members, they might be able to talk with some of those folks like myself who are newer. And we can talk through some issues to make sure that if there are any questions or issues that are out there, we can work through those. One thing I have done is I've read through all the statutes, ordinances, rules of council, and I can assure you there are some inconsistencies and some interesting things if you actually read the words instead of assume that something's going to work. So this is not a session to try to figure out whether anything's has been done incorrectly in the past, because you folks have all done a good job as I've reviewed everything. But I think we just want to look to make sure we're all up to date and kind of following in some activities that are identical, so that we don't have documents coming out of one committee that look so different than something else that'll raise questions. We just want to make it easy for the public to have their input, get whatever information they need. And so this is going to be more of a discussion tonight than any kind of lecture or anything like that. So I will start off with asking a question on some organizational issues. I'm hoping everybody has a key to this. I'm hoping everybody has a key to this building at this point. I think I tried to get them to everybody. Um, does everybody have a key at this point? Okay, we're good there then. Um, also, you probably weren't told, you may have known, but there are mailboxes over at across the street that if you go looking, there may be some mail there for you from a particular ward or whatever, and so you can go look through there and make sure there's nothing that's too important. I know a lot of things get. I think we do a lot through electronic media, but every once in a while there's some things in the mail, and you should take a look at that. For some of the folks who've been on council before, is there anything else we need to think about in terms of organizational issues such as that? I guess not. The next thing I just wanted to mention is there are obviously going to be some training that's required now that you're on city council, and some filing issues that are out there. You should get notices from either the Ethics Commission um, or the Ross County Board of Elections, but I'm going to ask the clerk, Ms. Moss, to take a look to make sure that we can give you whatever information we have about what's necessary out there so that we meet all those requirements and move on. I don't think there's anything that's coming up too soon. If you're newly elected, there may be some things. If you are, we're in some campaign this year, I think some of the time frames would change. But I think if we're just looking at the future here, I don't think there are a lot of issues out there unless somebody else is aware of something. I'm using this just because we're streaming, so I'm going to use the mic. Uh, Let me do this. Let me take it on myself to check, um, just to see if there's anything out there that that we need to be looking at. I know that the clerk got a request about addresses and things for newly elected folks, so that the Ethics Commission has up-to-date information for all who is actually serving. So let me take that on myself. I was hoping this would be an informal conversation, and I would not come out of here with any tasks, but apparently I've got one on early in the discussion. So I will check on that, and I'll get back to you and let you know about whether there's anything out there that, in terms of the ethics, that's coming up really soon that we need to be worried about, but hopefully not. The other thing is, I did take the training on the Open Meetings Act and the Public Records Act. It's the Sunshine Law. It's as I read the statute and the mandatory requirement, it's kind of odd because it seems like it would require you to do this early in your term, when in fact it says sometime during your term. So presumably, we could wait for 2 years here and the last day take the training that we need to actually have. But it's good training, and it will give you a lot of information if you haven't already done it. I went ahead and did it before I was sworn in, and if you read the definitions in the statute, it allows for someone who has been elected and certified, they can go ahead and take it ahead of time, and it counts as though they're already in office. I will confess, I actually got 3 hours of continuing legal education while I was at it, so I had a benefit from doing it, so I'm not going to complain. As I mentioned, I've gone through kind of the statutes and ordinances and rules of council and Robert's Rules of Order, because that's kind of the sequence of events as the ordinance lays out as to how we're supposed to proceed in our meetings. Some of the things are very consistent. Some of them seem a little inconsistent. But I think the main thing we want to do is, and I want to do, is see if there are any questions about, for example, the rules of council. Does everybody have a copy of the rules of council? Okay, so you've got those. Now, obviously, those are an ordinance, so to try to change those, we'd have to go ahead and do it as a new ordinance to amend anything that's happening there. And also, if we wanted to amend any of the administrative rules that are already there in place, that are in the revised ordinances, we'd have to change those by ordinance. I'm not sure they're completely consistent, and it might be good for us if you read through that and you read through the administrative section that's more general. It may give you an idea of whether there are any inconsistencies that you see that you think we ought to correct. And I'll give you the example. The example is I've seen 2 or 3 different places where the time for the meeting, one time it's 7:30 and one place it's 7. And once again, it isn't a big deal, except that if it's an ordinance, we ought to make sure we're in compliance. So, I mean, that's what I'm looking at. And that actually leads to one of the things that I want to talk about tonight, and that is time for these meetings. It's up to this council to decide when the meetings will be held. And as I understand it from conversations with folks, that has varied over time. Sometimes it's been earlier, say at 6 o'clock. In some instances, as I understand it, the winter months were a certain time and the summer months were another time. But I just want everybody to, think about what they think works best for the public, to make sure they've got a chance to get here, and get their opportunity to have their say, which is the most important thing, but also not to make it hard on people, by setting a time that, because there's sometimes in the winter when 7 o'clock seems late, and the older I get, 7 o'clock seems later, not every year. But having said that, I think it's worth a discussion, and I don't know if any of you have any views on whether we ought to take a look at changing that or whether we ought to just kind of clean up that inconsistency that I'm talking about.
Just from my standpoint, I think if we're having committee meetings before, if we were to schedule it earlier at 6 o'clock, now you're going to be having your committee meetings at 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30. That might eliminate a lot of people from being able to come to the committee meetings, which is when a lot of the discussion takes place, I think. So I think if we're going to continue that, where we normally do committee meetings on Monday before the council meetings, that maybe the 7 o'clock is a good time, because that allows for up to an hour of committee meetings if you need that time. And I think between 6 and 8 is a good time for people to be able to show up, and I think it allows that. If that's what we want, and I think that is what we want, is for people to come and voice their opinion when we're talking about an issue that's critical to them.
The one question I had about the committee meetings, they don't have to be right before, and I know that puts more of a burden on people here if we schedule them at some other time. But I'll just throw out there that I don't think we want to try to jam them in to make sure, just to get the committee meeting in, that we are going to do it at a certain time, and that rushes us. So there's always that option to do it at a different time, as you know. But I'll leave that up to council, because as I said, we're not making decisions here tonight. This is just a discussion. And if anyone in the public has anything that they want to say about any issue as it comes up, we're not following the normal order where you've got to wait for participation. So if anybody has anything to say about that, just at least step up and give your name and address so that we've got that, and then you can go ahead and comment.
John Thacker, 990 Columbus Street, apartment 307. As to the specific conversation you're having right now as to committee meetings and when they should be scheduled, I can recall Mrs. Payne having a human resources meeting over at the city administration building, perhaps about 4 o'clock or 4:30. That was extremely rare. I don't know why it was done over there instead of. Perhaps you could remember it was a conversation about probably the county health district board, somebody who was nominated. I just don't remember the circumstances because it's been a while. But it certainly is a resource, but it would have to be during the hours that they're open. And they pretty much close at 5 over there, and then that's it. So it would, and then of course, if you do wish to down the road, or of course what we're doing now is putting it on YouTube, then that would require a whole different kind of setup. I don't know if they're set up in their meeting rooms for that kind of, for televising. But it doesn't have to be in this room. In fact, you've talked about perhaps having council meetings themselves at different locations, so that the mechanics of doing that is tricky but not impossible. And my hope is that you are able to do that down the road. That's the specific question I had about this. There was one other one, though. It is off topic from, but I do want to raise it. It is about assignments to the committees. I realize they come from the president and then are assigned to each committee depending upon what the subject matter is, but also there are sometimes, Mrs. Nickerson had a committee that studied the televising. That was a special committee. There are special committees that have met over time. What I don't know is on what's the mechanism for initiating that process. In other words, you have elected officials, including yourself, who can raise an issue of whatever nature and have that sent to you, who then send it to the appropriate committee. But what is the mechanism for those of us on this side to do that? If we have an issue that we would like to raise, do we raise it with our city council person or with the mayor, and then, or can it just come directly to the president? Or I'm curious about that.
Interestingly, if you read the rules of council, someone can bring an issue to the council. It's supposed to be in writing and presented to council. And if that happens, it can either be done through the elected officials that are here, including the mayor or any of the elected officials, or I would assign it if somebody brings a specific issue. Now, once again, the difficulty becomes if somebody comes with kind of a nebulous idea, it gets a little tougher to assign that if we don't know exactly what it is. However, we will do our best, and there is a rule in the rules of council that actually addresses that particular issue.
As a follow-up, the question is, as to assignments that were not disposed of with the last council, do they just disappear, or do they reappear with the new council? I can think of a few that, to my knowledge, never went to a committee meeting for whatever reason, perhaps because the issue is no longer necessary. I don't know.
These are pretty good questions for segues. So the answer is they do not disappear. It's up to this council. However, there's a rule in the rules of council that addresses that particular issue too, and essentially says that it gets carried over. And in fact, the clerk has put together and been putting together our list of what's carrying over so that we can get those to everyone and make sure that we address every issue that's out there.
And I should point out to those who are here, perhaps I'm just kind of dense, but it was literally 3 years before Dustin Prohl explained to me what it means to have the emergency language at the end of legislation as opposed to ones that do not. It's not something that's obvious. I guess maybe I should have picked it up at some point, since I did come to virtually every meeting during that time. But it was just like a less than 3 minute explanation that took care of that. I don't know. Obviously, you can't teach everybody. You could be reinventing the wheel if you do this at every meeting. But is there some way that those of us who are on this side can know what all these little rules and customs, I guess you would call it, of council, as to why they do what they do, so that people can understand it without having to just sit there puzzled?
Well,
some people don't even know what the 3-read rule is all about and why it can be waived.
Well, let me just say, the people that are on council are looking at the ordinances, looking at the rules, and they're gonna follow those. And everybody's been very cooperative at this point in trying to work through those. So if somebody's got a question about those issues, if there are any specific questions, if you want to submit those on something like that, we'll raise them in either new business or somewhere during one of the meetings and go ahead and do a quick explanation, and then everybody will understand exactly. I don't want to presume that anybody here does or does not understand that, because I think that's unfair. So, but if you want to present, you can send it to me as council president with a question that says, could you please explain the explanation? We'll do that and get it out to everybody so that everybody is on the same page. Okay.
And also, sort of related issue. I don't want to go too tangential on you, but as for people who are notified of meetings such as this one, or for city council, or for any kind of committee meeting, there is an email list. I realize that people on this side are not automatically on that list, but I believe it's not impossible to get on it because I did. So do we direct it to Ms. Moss or you or to anyone else? I know some people who do not know about the meetings ahead of time, the agenda or whatever might be the case.
If you direct it to the clerk, she'll talk to me, but you'll automatically be on the list. You will automatically be on the list. If you request to be on it, I'd like to be able to send it out to everybody in Chiillicothe, but that's not realistic.
Well,
but anybody who requests gets on the list, and that's automatic.
I think you could accomplish that by doing it on Facebook, but it's not quite a legal notice, but nonetheless, it would accomplish the same thing. Because virtually everybody looks at Facebook. That's how we know what happened with Mrs. Nickerson's cat. Thank you.
Thanks. That is a good segue into one of the issues that I do want to discuss with folks, and that is about the possibility of having meetings other places, either out in the wards or at other locations. Number one, this facility is not the easiest to get into. If the elevator's not working, then we got certain members of the public that can't even get up the stairs to get here. I'd like to look toward doing that soon. The rules give me the authority to do that, but as I promised everybody when we came to council, it's not up to me to force people to do things. I'm here to help you and to make sure we do the right thing for the public and for all of you. So I would like kind of your input on whether you think that makes some sense. There are some obvious places around town, perhaps the school. I'm not looking at Payne, but perhaps the school or at OUC. Other places where the streaming probably is already set up, wouldn't be that hard, and we wouldn't be cutting people out of being able to attend. So if you could, at this point, give me some input about what your thoughts are, because obviously if it's something that everybody doesn't want to have happen, then I'm not going to try to force the issue.
I don't disagree that trying a different location is a bad idea, but I think choosing one and being consistent with it, a different place than this, I'm 100% for. But I feel like the idea of moving meetings around to different places, that could be very confusing for the public. They may not, be able to keep us up to date on where the location is going to be. But, finding a new home for council, I don't think is a bad idea. Does that make sense?
I kind of agree with Allison on that. And that was going to be a question. Are you looking for just temporary solutions, or are you looking for a permanent solution for us to move into some other permanent location? With this building being the only thing that gets used for is council once every couple of weeks for a couple hours, I don't know that that's the best use of our resources in the city. As I say that, I think that the administration needs to weigh in on that. And when we get an engineer in place to look at the facility plans that have been done over the years and help us give us a recommendation where we go permanent. If we stay here, we end up somewhere else. But I do like the idea of being somewhere that's more accessible to the public, even if it's just a short-term solution while we explore other options.
There are really three considerations as I see it. You're weighing the members of the public being familiar and traditional, knowing it's here, so they know where they're coming and all that. The next question is you want to make sure you've got some ability for the streaming if we're going to try to do that wherever you are, that the people can see that. The other consideration, besides the fact that obviously a permanent different place is a somewhat of a solution, the other question is for the people that represent the different wards, whether they'd feel like it'd be helpful to have a meeting in their ward, recognizing you got to meet all those other requirements, and we'd have to give out certainly enough advance notice so that nobody gets surprised. We're not gonna send it out, 3 days ahead and say, oh, by the way, it isn't going to be here. We'd get that notice out well in advance to let everybody know. So those are the considerations. We're not, voting or making decisions, as I said, but I just wanted to get some input from people and see what their feelings are about it.
Yeah, I think especially in the East End, the Sixth Ward to Fourth Ward, some citizens may feel, I don't know, disenfranchised or may not, they don't pay attention to the city council. And I feel like if we were able to hold it somewhere, like maybe the Fraternal Order of Police building down in the Sixth Ward, or maybe even Mount Logan School or a church down in the East Side, um, it could really get them maybe motivated, once we come back here to kind of start attending meetings and kind of just get them into it a little bit, you know what I mean, and kind of teach them a little bit. And so I think it would be a good idea, and maybe for not permanently, but maybe for the months of so and so, we'll be taking this on the road, and then we'll come back permanently at this point in time. That type of situation.
Here's a quick thought. We have 6 wards currently, 12 months out of the year. Like you mentioned, we could, assign certain months as long as it's made known to the public when those are and be consistent about it. Because like I said, I don't necessarily disagree with the idea, just as long as the public is well informed of when or where those meetings will be held. But like the Mount Logan School, I think that's a great idea. Chiillicothe City Schools, I think, is a great idea. OUC is a good idea. Ross County Service Center.
Well, the one thing I had told Mayor Feeney I was going to talk to the council about this and ask him to have some of his folks start taking a look to see where there would be streaming possibilities so that we'll be in good shape if we decide to go somewhere. We're not cutting off a group of people that can't get out and can't get here. Because obviously that's our goal, is to reach as many as we can. So it doesn't do us any good to move this out into the community and then cut off a bunch of people who otherwise would get to see it. So those are all thoughts that we can take into account. I will let you know well in advance if I decide to do this pilot project, so that if it doesn't go well, you can blame me, and you don't have to worry about it. So, but we'll see what we can do. But I think all of your comments are well taken, and that's helpful. I don't know if any members of the public have any thoughts on that particular issue. these are the kinds of issues that that make these kinds of meetings worthwhile, because I've thought about the same thing about this building, but I recognize I'm not the city's lawyer, even though I am a lawyer. I'm not the city's lawyer, and I need to address some of these with the law director. But this has really been a valuable discussion so far on these issues, just because it's been helpful to get the views of council and to see, because there's a lot of common ground we can reach on a lot of these issues if we work together on these. So I really appreciate the discussion. I'm just running through a list of things I have, but anytime you want to raise something, feel free to go ahead and raise it, because like I say, this is an informal discussion of issues. One thing I do want to raise is an interesting issue that's raised by Ohio Revised Code section 733.07. It's odd because it says whenever the mayor is out of the city, the president of council becomes the acting mayor. I don't think that means if he's in Waverly, and I don't think that means, and so that's not what I'm talking about. It's the second part of the sentence that becomes problematic. The second part of the sentence says, and if you're the acting mayor, you can't preside over the city council meeting. So if on the rare occasion, the very rare occasion that Luke Feeney is in Florida and we're having a meeting, it's likely that the president pro tem should theoretically take the chair and actually operate, be in control of the meeting. Okay, that's another one that I'll run past them, but that's what it says. It seems pretty plain, and like I say, it's not really an issue. I don't think, if you read it literally, to say he's out. He's at a restaurant that's right across the line from being in the city. I think what it's talking about is if he were gone for a while, then that kicks in. Got nothing to do with being the acting mayor. It's got to do with what that means to whether I can preside over the meetings here. So we'll just have to see if that ever comes up. And obviously the 733.07 of the Ohio Revised Code. If I misquoted the number, I'll apologize and fix it when you call me and tell me that's not the right one, but I believe it is. It's not addressed in the revised code. So in the wisdom of the legislature, they decided that they would not allow the president of council to preside, but they don't say whether the president pro tem may vote as the presiding member, which means you might end up at, the Robert's Rules of Order if you follow the sequence of events. So we'll just have to cross that bridge if it looks like it's coming, and I would certainly let the president pro tem know ahead of time, Allison, that that's, you're going to have to run the meeting that night, and I'll be a member in the public. I'm not going to sit there where the mayor is. I'll sit back there where the public is. So, no. There are chairs. Yeah, well, you have to understand there are chairs I'd rather not sit in. Okay, well, we will leave that for a later discussion. One other thing that I wanted to say was that I looked at the early part of the calendar, and one of our meetings would fall on Memorial Day, on the 27th. Okay. Sometimes I have the authority to move that within a week later, as long as it doesn't go beyond the end of that month, according to the rules of council. Well, the end of that month is that Friday, but I don't know whether people want to start looking at their calendar now and saying, I'd really rather not do it on Tuesday because I'm going to be out of town over the weekend, or I'd rather do it on Wednesday. But if you can give me some input here in the next few weeks, I'll go ahead and declare that, and we'll make the public announcement so everybody knows what the date is, and there's no question, and the public can be there to see whatever they need. The next issue, are there any questions about that or anything that jumps?
There's a Board of Zoning Appeals meeting on the 28th for that Tuesday following. I know sometimes members of the public like to go to those meetings if there's an issue going on in their neighborhood or whatnot. I don't know that I would suggest that Tuesday, but perhaps Wednesday. Although a lot of people have.
I could set this on Friday, and it'd be real quick meeting probably. There wouldn't be, okay, well, we'll work through that.
Sorry.
We'll work through that because the rules specifically say you can postpone it, but it's got to be within 7. It has to be before the next Monday. Now we could do it on the next. No, because it's either got to be before the end of that particular month, or before the next Monday, 1 week. And so Friday being the last day, I think we're stuck. Good. Absolutely. Sure could. No. Yeah, I mean, let's face it. The issue that I was looking at was a lot of people might be getting back that day, and then the next day, they're trying to catch up. So doing it on that Tuesday might not be good, and you start to just move it back. But in any case, yeah, I mean, the rules of council are the rules of this council, and so. If someone makes a request for us to send it to, send it to the law director to look at and prepare an ordinance, I mean, we can make changes. Like I say, there may be some cleanup things if you look through these rules and ordinances, just in terms of 735 versus 7, etc. One other one. Oh, yes. Well, first off, I don't want to get into a debate about it. Here's what I will tell you. What I will tell you is I will follow up with the law director, and we will get an answer to the question as to whether that was done properly or not. And once we get that answer, we will address it, depending upon what that answer is. I just, once again, the law director, we've got good legal counsel. We need to give them the opportunity to tell us what they think. But I understand your position, understand exactly what you're saying. And once again, the language of some of these things are pretty specific, and we need to read them. And that's why I'm just raising the issues on all of these, which is a great segue, by the way, to my next point. An invocation before the meeting. There is an ordinance that has even down to the language of the letter that I'm supposed to send to a list of congregations. It's really, really pretty interesting the way it's written, because at the time I'm sure it made perfect sense. But at this point, what it requires is for me to put together a list of congregations in and around Chiillicothe, and then to send out this letter that's very specifically worded in the ordinance. It's actually a resolution. It's resolution 9-11. And then it has some restrictions on how many times the same minister can do the invocation in a year's time, and there's got to be a rotation. I would like everybody to read it and just think through. I personally think the invocation's a great idea. Don't have any problem with that. And the rules about how it has to be performed, it has to be before the council, not on the agenda, those kinds of things, don't have any problem with. But the procedure for trying to select people gets pretty complicated, actually, when you try to read through that particular, that particular resolution. And once again, I'm not being critical of the people that passed it. I'm just saying it is certainly seems more complicated than it should be in terms of trying to have someone come in to do the invocation. Well, that's a discussion that we're going to have with council over time as we look at it. I'll look at some things. But once again, just to give you a flavor of this, this is what the letter is going to say. Dear religious leader, the Chiillicothe City Council makes it a policy to invite members. I mean, it's a long letter that is very, very specific, and it talks about this list of folks. I'm not saying that it's a good idea or a bad idea, but it's certainly somewhat interesting to try to figure out who we're sending this to at this point in time. My wife goes to St. Mary Catholic Church, and I'm not sure they know for sure whether there are 3 or 1 or 2 congregations because of some consolidations. And hey, you get into those things. There's probably a better way. I'm just asking everybody to take a look at it, read it, and give me your feedback on what you think about that. Because, that's an important question that if we're going to try to have the invocation done according to the ordinance. And once again, I'm a firm believer that if there's a rule, we follow it. And whether it's by statute, ordinance, whatever, and if we have the ability to change it and want to change it, we ought to change it. But not just kind of ignore it and hope nobody cares that we ignored it, I don't want to do that, and I know you don't either. And I will say at this point, I really appreciate all the cooperation I've gotten from all the elected officials, all of you folks, in trying to work through these things, because it makes it better for the public when we're trying to sort through these issues like this in a discussion, as opposed to me deciding that I'm right and I'm just going to go tell everybody why I'm right. That doesn't work very well. So now, one of the final things. This one's not working? Is that better? Okay, so the next question is about equipment. No, I'm kidding. It's me. Okay, well, I'm just going to move it back and we're going to talk and hopefully folks can hear. Um, the next, the one thing that would be helpful to me is a discussion about committee assignments and how that happens. Um, at this point in time, the president of city council makes the appointments, so they get a request from, um, as I pointed out, it might even be from the public, but it's a request from public officials, and then I make an assignment to the committees. What I'd like for you folks to take a look at, and I can get this to you, there's been kind of a form that goes out for that assignment. I'm not being critical of the form or saying it's good or bad or right or wrong. I just want to make sure that we all the committees do it consistently and use the form in the same way. So for example, if there are 3 lines there for the committee members and a vote's taken, that ought to be recorded some way, because one of the issues that arises is in that training I did, every committee meeting is a public meeting just like this meeting, and you have to have minutes. And there's no great definition of what that means. There really isn't. I've read the cases that are cited in the Sunshine Law Manual. It's just unclear. But I think we ought to try to do it consistently so that if the public looks at one committee document, it looks similar to the other one. It's kind of, we've just got consistency so that you don't have a member of the public saying, why are there no names on this one and there are names on this one, and why are there notes on this one and not? But some of you folks that have been on council a long time have been successful, done a great job with having these meetings. So I'm going to open it up to some of the seasoned veterans and ask you what your thoughts are about how we do that. At the committees, I'm sorry, at the committee? Okay. Well, the only thing I want to clear up is, and this is, lawyers cause more problems sometimes than they fix. But when I read these things, the first thing I say is, okay, now, are all those notes a part of the public record? And now, you've got notes on the back that somebody's writing, those kinds of things. So I just want to make sure and check with the law director and say, okay, so everybody understands that, if you want to do it this way, maybe that's fine, but you need to be aware that we need to have those things, and we need to have them in a place where people can find them, because I don't want a situation where each of the chairs of the committee are getting these overwhelming requests or lots of requests. Really, we ought to be able to have these things in a form and in a place where if there's a request, a public records request, we've got them, we get them out, and we're not transport them. Well, I think what I would suggest is that, that there be a discussion, kind of between the council members and see what everybody thinks works. Because once again, just because I think it's right doesn't mean that's what council thinks. I'm just here to help this along. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands the easiest way to create issues on public records or where there are inconsistencies between documents. All of a sudden, that will create somebody thinking that must be sinister in some way, when it's probably not. But that's the way people can sometimes view it. So we just want to be consistent, make sure we're doing it the same way. And once again, the folks that have been on council have been successful, so